What's up, guys? It's your boy Beats by Ash coming at you with number 3 of the Table 1 podcast, and today I'm here with Eoclar Ortiz. So I kind of want to start off this episode talking about really what I think is probably the fundamental problem in the game right now, and that just goes back to how unfair one particular deck is compared to other decks on like a base level. And
the consistency, the power, everything about it. It's like some decks are better in certain things, yes. But the fact that this deck has all of these things just makes it so strong. It's so consistent. It's green.
Yeah, and we both came from Yu-Gi-Oh! So, in a best of 3 format, things are very different. I've also played Magic. And this is my first time playing a best of 1 game, and it's very interesting to see like how that goes competitive wise, because when you think about it, I just think it's really hard, like if you want to win, to choose to play something other than green, because it's the only color in the game that has a searcher that can give you infinite value on its own, and it actually just has 2. And when we look at the cards that are in set 2, they're not choosing to fix that problem in the game. No other color is getting a infinite value searcher. And in set 3, I'm pretty sure there's no infinite value searcher for anyone else. And it's so busted in best of 1, man, because it's like, okay, why would you want to play in an 8-round tournament with Kaido when you're probably only going to curve out perfect like 55 to 60% of the time at best, when you could just open up playable with green every time and probably just win, because you'll go against someone in the tournament who didn't open up playable.
Even if you just open one searcher, that one good searcher, it can get you a single kid, a single law that can just win you the game outright. And the fact that you can use it multiple times, especially in law, where you can just bounce it back to your hand and replay it, it's crazy. It's infinite value, infinite hand. Sometimes it's just like my opponent just has 2 cards in hand because I've been able to attack them every single turn. And even then, I just have 11 cards in hand. So even if they do manage to, push something out, if they draw up a Kaido, damn, I just have 10 cards in hand. What's my opponent going to do?
He has to have 10 cost Kaido.
And then if he already has 1, oh, damn, I just have another kid in hand. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's like, okay, why is there just this 1 card in the game, 8 cost kid, which is essentially just like, it requires everyone else to just play a different game. Like, I saw this one video of this guy explaining like a law deck where he was just like, yeah, so it gets to a point where you just have like 20 cards in your hand and you're like not even playing the same game. You're just drawing cards and you're just having fun, and the other guy...
okay, genuinely, law, one of the most fun decks in the game if you can get good at it. The feeling of just popping off and being like, damn, I have more cards in my hand than my deck and my graveyard combined. This is kind of broken.
Well, I think really the fun of that just comes from your deck just being utterly broken compared to the other guy's deck. It's like if you're going against another person who's doing an equally as broken thing, then it's not even as fun. It's just like the disparity between red and green and the blue and purple is just insane. And even in red, red is honestly not as popular in the English meta as in Japan when you get into set 2, because in set 2 then you get Curly to Dan, so you at least have an equal amount of searchers as green, whereas that's why the only reason to play law is because you just get access to 3 potential searchers, whereas everyone else is playing with 2, but then you're losing the life. So then if you're not playing a deck like that, I think it's just hard for you to see success in the 8-round tournament. And I kind of like to make the analogy to how Yu-Gi-Oh! Is. Essentially, in the past 6 months, there's just been this one deck called Tier Limits, which essentially just made it to where a lot of people quit the game. A lot of people just kind of took a step back in general, because if you're not playing this deck, you really just can't win at locals. And
your deck has to be specifically built to beat the deck or either be that deck. There is no other thing that you can play.
Oh, and the deck was $400 for the longest time. And you got to think, it's okay, even if you angle your deck to beat this deck, the other guy can just still beat you, like 8 out of 10 times. It got to a point in the game where even if the guy is terrible with this deck and you're like a GOAT who's been playing for 10 years, it doesn't really matter. Like 8 out of 10 games, you just can't win because it's so powerful. And I think that it's very similar to the situation we're in with the set 1 meta currently in the game with green. The difference is in this game, there's actually like a casual audience. So you got to think like people in this game are willing to go with strategies that aren't green, just because of like the sheer like fan service in this game, in the alt arts. And that's the only reason why our meta is even diverse. So like you look at the Treasure Cup that happened last weekend in Miami, it's like, since they have the PPG, that's probably one of the more competitive areas, I would say, for Bandai games. I'm kind of new to Bandai games, but that's kind of what I've gathered so far. And it just seems like majority of those people understood that there's really no reason for you not to play green if it's best of 1, just by sheer like consistency purposes. And when we look at the set 2 meta, it's just like, my first thoughts are now, like, what is going to change? Well, we're not really introducing a lot of new strategies. Some people are like, okay, Whitebeard is cool, he has 6 life. But then you also got to think, a lot of that is just coming from like people are just overhyped based on the fan service because he's a cool character. The alt art looks cool. He's introducing a lot of new characters, and then you just realize, oh wait,
in reality,
in reality, he doesn't give you any more additional infinite value searchers than you already had. And I've actually seen a lot of people in the Asian community say that like
Zoro's just better. Honestly.
Zoro's better, and I've also just heard that with the Whitebeard deck, if you don't see your Vistas early, like you're just losing. You're just going far behind, and like it's cool. Okay, you get Curly to Dan, which is on play. Add a 1-cost red card from the top 5 to your hand, so that can add Nami, and that's cool. But why would I play that when I could just play green, and the overall power level of green is just increased? So my first initial reaction of the set 2 meta is, the meta is going to stay the exact same. Green is still going to be the best deck. Red is equally as playable. It's not equally as playable, but it's like if you're trying to counter green, then going red is obviously like currently red Luffy is the best way to counter that deck. But then you're just losing to these other strategies, and it's not like enough. It's not enough of like a 2-deck meta to where you can really afford to do that. Whereas green, you can still consistently beat red, but you also just destroy some of the other matchups like blue, where the guy just can't play the game. And some of these cards that are coming out in green are just downright broken. Like the 4-cost Yamato that's 6k. It's like, okay, well let's look at the stat line of the game currently. It's a 4-cost 6k vanilla. That's like the strongest vanilla stat line in the game. And then you get a broken effect and it's a searchable card. It's like, wait, why do you get this? Green already has the only like ability in the game to tap stuff on play, and I would argue that Nekomamushi is probably like the best card to start out with in the game, and that already just makes like Momo, insane. Because like currently in the Treasure Cup, I think the reason why green dominates is because if you go against Law, you go against green, even against red. I like to choose to go second with Kid, and I'm currently playing 4 Momo, 4 Neko, because I think whenever you open up with Neko, then you are just being in a really polarizing situation, because you're going to tap whatever the guy puts out on turn 2 when he's on the play. So let's just say he puts out a Nico Robin. Okay, well, if you have Nekomamushi on turn 2, then you're immediately putting out your Neko, tapping their Robin. Yeah, your leader is at 5 against their 4. Well, you have 2 additional Dawn, so you can just make your guy 7. He's not committing 3 cards to stop that, so like,
I mean, just extremely polarizing.
And even if he does, you're just at 2 cards now in hand. You're like, oh, I have a Nico Robin. I can kill this Cat Viper. Okay, you killed my Cat Viper. You still have 2 less cards. Now you just tapped your Nico Robin for me for free.
It just gets attacked again.
Yeah, and my leader can double attack it. So like, your guy's dying. There's really no way for you to win in that situation. And also, if the guy has no Kiku, that's even like,
More degenerate.
That's even more like important for you to get the Cat Viper search instead of the Ezo, because you having that on turn 2 means you have 2 Dawn to put on your leader to make him 7 on 5. Where if you have the Ezo, it's just 6 on 5. The guy discards a 2K, and it feels a lot worse.
I mean, they have to commit at the very minimum 2 cards from hand. If they put down 2 cards before, let's just say they put down something on turn 1 and then something on turn 2. By the time they get to turn 3 and you've already killed their thing, they only have like 3 cards in hand, and they have to discard 2 of them. So the sheer amount of hand advantage you're gonna have is extremely powerful.
Yeah, no, especially against Law, when you're just not going to attack them yet and you're just going to play for board. It almost feels like that other guy just can't come back anyway.
Oh, 100%.
Because that means that he's just never going to be able to shambles. Like, by the time that he's going to have 5 units on board, you either have 7 cost or 8 cost kid on the board. And you probably have, like, a low cost attacker as well. Which, like, fundamentally, green already plays extremely well into Law, even if you don't have Nekamamushi on curve initially, because your small attack characters that already got their immediate value on play can just be used later on to kill their searchers for free. So you're not using a resource on that.
I mean, a 3K on a 1K, Bonnier, 0 attack, Momonosuke is just extremely powerful. You have to commit at least 2 cards or a blocker to that.
100%. And that's honestly why I just don't see how people can play less than 4 Momo in the kid deck. Currently, I'm playing 4, and you look at the people who won the most previous Treasure Cup in Miami, where I think half of the top cut was kid, and there was over 30% of the people that showed up were playing kid.
And even then, you got to think, there's also Law, which is also playing green.
Yeah. But my point is, if you choose to go second against Law or Kid and you open up Momo, that's honestly better than opening Cat Viper in some situations, because essentially I'm going to let my bald kid die because I'm a bully and I don't really care about that. So I'm going to put him into play for 1, tap him, add the Neko. What's that do? Well, that's doing 2 things. That's accomplishing 2 things for our deck. On our opponent's next turn, number 1, we're diverting a damage because he's killing our bald kid, because he doesn't want us to get infinite value. Okay, well now I have a Nekamamushi, so I can accomplish the first thing that we were talking about, but I also just mitigated the damage, which is really important because the Law person is trying to burst you out before you're able to put down your 8 cost kid.
8 cost kid just so polarizing in the matchup. Whoever gets it first really just has an advantage.
That's very true. I mean, that's very true in every matchup. If you don't have 8 cost kid, then you're at an immediate disadvantage.
Oh, 100%. I feel like, 8 cost kid, so fundamentally super strong card. Even in its worst situation, you're playing it out, going second, you only have 8 Dawn. If you're playing Law and you shove a Brook, you're just insanely broken.
Yeah, because you just get to play the Brook with your kid and then put 2 Dawn under it.
I mean, that's just the first possible point where you're able to bring it out. And being able to bring it out with its ability, it just puts you in such a strong place. It can honestly just win you the game outright.
Yeah, so it also just allows you to go down to 0 in Law very, very easily, very comfortably. And the other guy thinks that he's in a good position to lethal you, when in reality, it's you actually just know that the guy can't win the game. And you're just bypassing the life total aspect of the game.
Oh, 100%.
Like, you're just playing a different game. And that's what we've seen Radical Beam be so popular in recent times, because in Law, if you're going second and you take the first damage, then you're already at 3. You just need to take 1 more hit, and then you have a 1 cost 4K, which that 1 cost 4K is the difference between you protecting your 8 cost kid or not.
Yep, 100%. And most of the time, if you have 10 Dawn, you're not going to be committing much more than just the 9.
And one thing I want to point out as well, something I don't see a lot of people do is if you have let's say 2 or 3 life left and it's turn 8, a lot of times you can just play kid and just not even tap it.
Oh yeah,
because you're just
attack your leader.
Yeah, like you don't really care about them attacking your leader, and a lot of people don't recognize that. They're like, okay, I don't want to put the card down because I can't put the Dawn under it, so it's not really doing anything for me. But honestly, you can just play it, not even tap it, or sometimes you also want to play it and tap it and not use the Dawn. Maybe you want to allocate the Dawn under your 7-drop so that you can untap during the end phase because you just don't care about your life total, and that's something very important to consider in the mirror match.
In Law, one thing that you can do is that if you're at 10 Dawn and you have a kid plus something that you need to play on board, and you have 3 characters already on board, you just go kid, effect, summon your other character, and then you can go shambles, you know, and that's just extremely powerful.
Shit, that is really broken.
And especially if you have a Brook in hand that you can play off of something. If you have a Brook in Law in hand,
True.
you get to play a blocker plus bring something back that could be possibly another 2K. Which is extremely powerful.
That's true, because that just means that you didn't have to play the Brook off of your 8 cost. You could just play it off of the Law that you shamble. So I didn't really think about that.
Yeah, it's really, really strong.
Yeah, and honestly, I would also say another irritating thing is the 8 cost Kazuki Odin that's coming out. That card is just really polarizing as well, because you gotta think, it's like, okay, but 8 cost Kid is polarizing in 1K in one way, and that card is just polarizing in the exact opposite part of the spectrum. Because you got to think. So a lot of people are unsure whether you should play Kinemon or Kid in set 2, and it's kind of different because in Kid, you know, you're trying to just like play defensive so you can set up a wall. Well, in Kinemon, you just want to make sure that you can like have a faster like tempo advantage, because when you put out your Kazuki Odin, you don't have any defense, but you can still use your leader ability essentially, because your 8 cost Kazuki Odin does the same thing as your Kid leader without forcing you to use that leader. And even if they kill it, just the sheer versatility of the on KO effect to play a 3 cost Wano Country card from your deck, that's just so broken. That makes it
so strong. It just allows for any deck just to become extremely versatile. I mean, if you have that out, you can get literally anything you need from your deck.
Yeah, and you also got to think, like, one thing I haven't heard a lot of people talk about is, let's say you have, like, an Okiku on the board, and you had to attack with your Okiku initially so that you could, maybe you didn't attack with your Okiku, but you attacked with something else, killing my Odin. Then I can use my Odin's effect to summon an Izo from my deck, and I can use the on play to tap your card, even though it's not my turn, which is kind of crazy.
Oh, it's absolutely insane.
Yeah, that's like really broken. And you got to think, it's like, okay, previously, I just feel like right now the supernova keyword is just really broken, and it's like, okay, going into this next set, we'll just increase the other keyword that's also in the deck, and that just seems completely unfair. Like, why do you get to have those cards? And also, it just makes Paradise Waterfall even more broken, because then you're gonna, like attack with your Kazuki Odin 2 times, and the guy's gonna try to kill it, and then you just untap it.
Just untap it. It's extremely, extremely powerful. I've been on that card since day one. I think that card is so strong. It just allows you to save any card that you want. You know.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really good in the mirror match. By the way, you should speak into the mic more, speak louder, because, but yeah, like, you gotta think, in this new meta, that's even more important if you're using Kinemon, because, you're already getting a 1 Dawn discount on playing your Wano Country cards. So then if you have a Paradise Waterfall, that's just the Dawn that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
No, that's true. Paradise Waterfall is it's so good.
Yeah, so a lot of Japanese deck lists that I've seen, they actually just no longer run Punk Gibson. They just run 3 Waterfall, because you can just untap your stuff, and you got to think, okay, well, now green potentially has 12 total cards. They say on play, tap your card, and as well, they have 4 searchers for that. So they have 16 cards. So, like, I think that's like at least 30% of your deck is going to let you tap the other guy's stuff on play. So the Paradise Waterfall is going to be even more needed in this meta because it's like, okay, what if you have a Basil Hawkins and the guy plays 4-cost Yamato, taps it, then the Paradise Waterfall, like you need that or your card's gonna die.
Yeah, no, it just allows you to play super aggressively, and then you can just go on defensive and you're just one Dawn. You know?
And then also you gotta think it's like, okay, if I choose to go second, that means I can play an Okiku on turn 1. Okiku is already like a really broken card.
Yeah, no, and Okiku on turn 1 is just so impressive. You know, you just get to kill anything they play. And if you're playing against purple, well, what are they going to do? You know? By the time that they try to do anything, you're just going to already have killed them.
That's actually really true. So, hold on, guys. I'm comboing in my mind because I'm a G. So if I go second against Kaido and he plays first and he has to pass, then I play Okiku. The only thing he can do is island, and if he doesn't have that, he has to play a blocker. So it essentially just means that if he didn't open island, he automatically loses the game. Whereas without that interaction, the guy has a couple turns to potentially draw that. And the reason I say that is because if he puts out a blocker instead, you're just immediately removing it. And that's just something to think about.
I mean, yeah, the amount of damage you just put out without having to do anything.
Yeah.
They either discard their entire hand or just take the damage and hope that they get an island.
You're also just immediately attacking with a natural 5k attacker. So even if they don't have anything, that's just allowing you to start hitting for 5, which is, you know,
on
the magic
turn 2, which is so insane.
Yeah, you're hitting for 5 2 times without allocating any Dawn. Trying to think about all the cards that you can play out with the Kinemon leader here. Like, what are being the best cards? What's that one card that costs 1 that becomes a blocker if you have Kazuki? If you have Odin, or
it's Odin's wife. I don't remember who it is.
I'm not far enough in the anime.
I've seen the anime, but it's Odin's wife.
One Piece test. Who is Odin's wife? Dun 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 dun.
I don't know.
Dun. Judge.
Okay,
the judge. You get a game 1 loss.
It's Odin's wife. I know that much. But yeah, she becomes the...
That's a very interesting card because it essentially gives you an additional 1-cost blocker in the deck if you have enough cards that are treated as an Odin character card. And I find that very interesting because, you know, we've seen 1-cost blockers be a really premium in the game currently, but this card has a 1k counter. So that's something very interesting because a lot of people right now in the Law deck, especially, have been cutting 4 Beji, 4 Capone, whatever the hell you want to call it, in exchange for only playing Killer, because while they're both blockers and you're paying 1 more for a blocker, that card has a counter effect, whereas Capone doesn't, and a lot of your game ender finishers have no counter anyway. So at some point, you have to think, how many cards can I get away with being greedy that have no counter? And that's another one of those cards that could allow you to be more greedy in a sense, because you're getting to double dip, you know?
I think either way, they're just extremely powerful. Blockers is probably the best keyword in the game right now.
Really, you would say?
I think fundamentally. It literally, without blocker, red would just be the broken.
That's very true.
Blocker
without the
fundamentally is just the best keyword. It saves you in nearly every situation.
That's very true. I would also say, like, one other thing, it's not really a keyword, but just all the people that let them untap themselves, I just see that being broken right now and broken going forward, as well as on-play tap. And it's just like, okay, green, you just get to use all of these effects.
Yeah, it's extremely strong.
It's like, wait, why do you not get to do this in any other color? That's kind of just unfair.
I mean, I think that we're going to see eventually, you know, a lot of these gimmicks that are currently limited to one deck kind of spread out eventually. Yeah, between dual colors, I think that we're going to start to see some, you know, green-blue decks that they can utilize both tapping your opponent's stuff and a lot of these events that are extremely broken, like Love Mellow.
What do you think about the new Sanji leader in set 2 that allows you to play both green and blue cards?
I think the Sanji leader, while it might not be tier 1, I feel like it's going to be at the very minimum, a good rogue deck. I think it has potential for some skilled players to take control with it. Because I think that green is still going to be very, very strong at that point in time.
For sure, and we've seen a lot of good people say that, like on different tier lists, or just talking about the decks in general, some people like kind of devalue like Kazuki Odin leader, or as well like the red green Luffy. And I've heard like a lot of the good players combat that by saying, okay, well, while it is like has a lesser ability than the best cards that dip into green and are a leader, it also just has the color green in it, and by that measure, it makes it somewhat playable. And so we got to think about that in relation to what Sanji does, because if you don't know what it does, essentially once per turn, if you play a card from hand that is a non-effect character, you get to untap 2 Dawn. So the best thing about this is you get to access blue and green for the first time. And with that, we're allowed to play the early game of blue while having the late game of like 8-cost Kid, which in set 2, a lot of people I've seen haven't really been playing 8-cost Kid in the standard Kid deck or Kinemon deck. They're swapping it out for Odin because your Odin can double attack the Kid. But in this deck, I think that the Kid could be very viable because we're essentially just creating a bunch of like low-cost high attackers like Pacifista. That could be a really good combo in the deck. And then you put up your Kid, and that kind of creates a shield. One thing I want to mention about that leader is like, let's just talk about some of the things you can do that are kind of like not the first thought when it comes to deck building. And I want to start off with Bartholomew Kuma. It's a card that can let you block in the early game by at least turn 2, where on KO, you'll get to play a 6k vanilla from hand, and that can happen during your opponent's turn. So if they attack your leader or a character, maybe a searcher you don't want to die, and you block with that card, you play your Pacifista, and even though you were tapped out, now you have 2 more, which could allow you to play an event like a Paradise Waterfall, which then would allow you to untap your searcher.
Or a Love Mellow, which lets you get the draw.
Which is just a straight up broken card. Probably, I would say one of my top 3 events in the game currently. And I think there's a lot of potential with that because we're getting these new film green cards. I don't know if you've seen those.
I've seen the Straw Hat ones, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, first off, it has the keyword film/Straw Hat. I'm not sure if any of them are Supernova, but I know they're Straw Hat for sure. And you get a 7-cost Luffy that is a 7k blocker, which says on play, you may play 1 Straw Hat or film character from hand with a cost of 4 or less. Which one of the new film cards being added is the 4-cost 6k vanilla Zoro, which meets that typing criteria in green. And so essentially you're paying 7 Dawn to play a 7k blocker as well as a 6k attacker. So that's 13 total power for 7 Dawn. But then your leader ability activates untapping 2. So now you're paying 5 Dawn for 13k power. And that's something really relevant to think about. Because that just means that you're going to be able to protect those cards even if they have a tapper. Like, let's say they have a Yamato, which is going to be really common next set, and they're going to tap your Zoro. Well, then you have the Dawn necessary to be able to defend that card with an event.
I think that along with those film cards, I think that the Nami is also extremely powerful.
Oh, yeah. I didn't mention that.
The Searcher Nami. Mm-hmm. It's on summon and on attack to search.
That card. So it's a 3-cost 5k attacker. On play and on attack, you may look at the top 3 cards of your deck by paying 2 and add a film card from your pile to your hand and put the rest on bottom, which is a really nice card because you could be played off of your Luffy and then you could pay 2 Dawn to do it. And every turn that it survives, you're just getting another a search. And we got to think about, okay, well, that isn't a like activate main effect. At the same time, that's another green card, by the way. And it's being added to the green pool where there was already 2 infinite value searchers. Now you just get a 3rd infinite value searcher.
It's also hard to kill.
Yeah, because also 5k. And you're also, maybe you just only put that card onto the field when you use your Luffy, which is already a 7k blocker. So it already has immediate protection. That's something to think about. You're getting
Extremely powerful.
That means anytime you're using the Searcher, you're getting immediate protection. And I don't know, like, what cards you can add off of that off the top of my head, but I would assume you could add a 2K. And if you can add a 2K film card, that just sounds really broken, because then you have the protection from your blocker, as well as your 2K that you added, and then you're guaranteed to get your hidden next turn and get the search.
Yeah, extremely, extremely powerful.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see, like, what kind of cards in the film package will be added to that deck, because essentially you could have 3 different infinite value engines in the green archetype without having to take a negative side effect from playing something like Law, where you take 1 less life. And I think that, like, right now, the 1 less life is just a lot, like, more of a setback than people have, like, been regarding it in, because
1 less life is also 1 less card total, which just makes it so you will always have less hand advantage than your opponent. So from the start of the duel, it's already going to be an uphill battle. The thing is that Law is an extremely powerful color combination, which allows it to try to get to, to be able to fight it. That's why I don't think that very many other decks currently that are dual color are good or even viable for events like the Treasure Cup. I think that Blurple Croc, though, is definitely strong with the new structure deck, with the new film structure deck. Sadly, that's not legal for the Treasure Cup. So, I just don't think that's going to be very, very good at all.
Exactly. On the topic of Blurple Croc, there's actually a new event that's being added in set 2, which says, for a cost of 0, it's a blue card. Counter, give one of your characters a leader plus 3k, then discard a card. Now, it's a very interesting effect, because a lot of people are writing this off since it's just a neg-2 to gain an effect. But in the Blurple Croc deck,
you have to be discarding cards.
Yeah, because you have to be at 4 or less cards to activate your leader ability to draw a card. And that just allows you to play into that criteria. And
it also allows you to lay a lot of non-blockers, which is something that the deck has struggled with. Because if you can't use it as counter fodder, it's just kind of stuck in your hand until you play it.
That's very true.
So it allows you to play a lot of those higher level, you can play more crocodiles and more cards to play aggressively with, like Mihawks,
That's true, because that's another card you can play on the same turn you put out a big threat, which is one of the previous, like, faults of the deck, is that the turn that you put out a threat, you have to be at such a high advantage over the other person that you're okay with taking a turn off of defending yourself. And that card kind of solves that. One additional thing I want to add to that is that that card also allows you to play mind games with your opponent. Because as a person who's going against Blurple Croc, my main thing is, if I attack, in addition to how much Dawn does he have, like, how many cards does he have? Because if he has 5, then he can play one of his events, and then he'll draw one. Well, now he could technically have 6 cards in hand and then draw one with that ability. And that's something you have to think about regardless of whether the guy has it. And I think people just aren't going to think about it anyway, because it's already like a not played deck, and then it's already like, that is like a kind of an iffy card, because it's not like Baroque Work types. And that's the problem with the deck right now. It's like, honestly, I think that could be a really strong tier 2 deck if Overheat was a Baroque Works card.
I just think that currently it's like very difficult to play that deck. It's just, it requires a lot of skill, and sometimes you just get unlucky versus, like, certain decks.
Yeah, my main fault in the testing I've experienced so far is that versus green, it's very difficult to beat the green person, because you always want to go second because of the power level of our curve and the fact that our leader costs us a Dawn anyway to play. And since we're always defending, we're going to have to use 1 Dawn at least to we're gonna have to use a minus dawn effect, my bad, in order to not die before turn 10. Whether that be a 5-cost queen, or that be like maybe you're in a blast breath situation or an Uta. And because of that, if you go first on a fundamental level, if you use a minus dawn effect before 10 dawn, now you're just at a 2 dawn negative advantage to the other guy, and your deck already like is very like low like bearings to the ground until you get to turn 10. I just don't think you can afford to do that. So when they play an Okiku on the play on turn 2 and you don't have Marshall D Teach, you automatically just lose the game. Like there's really no way to go around it because that card just straight up counters your Uta, which is like your only other turn 2 play besides Miss All Sunday. And if you're playing Miss All Sunday on turn 2, you're already kind of screwed because you're just getting no value from it. And also, that's one of the best cards in the deck. And the green person just continuously taps your Miss All Sunday, especially going forward when with green getting another tapper. It's like you will just never get to use the effect. And that's the problem with it. Versus every other matchup, it's amazing. So if you live in an area where there's a fake meta like ours, which I mean just 80% of the people play purple, then it's just broken and it's just a free low meta for you. But if you're living in like the real side of the world, probably like a first world country where there's actually like packs and stuff, I would not recommend it.
Yeah, no, I think that if your players are pretty decent, it's kind of difficult to win with that color combination, you know. The character right now.
One thing I want to bring up is that I feel like a lot of people from a competitive standpoint have rose-tinted glasses on how powerful their deck is because like with the current situation, a lot of people entering this game, like, you know, me personally is my first Bandai game and I haven't experienced the counter mechanic in general, but I've been grinding a lot. So I understand the difference between someone who's newer to that mechanic than like, you know, your boy over here who's locked in, baby, you know? Like, because I'm comboing in my head right now, I understand how much Dawn I need to allocate at what time. It makes it to where I could just win with any deck. And that's something we've been talking about because I've won a lot with Doffy, and that's partially because I could just win with any deck against like a certain like type of player. Like, no offense to anyone, but it's just like I'm just putting in more time than, you know, a large majority of the people that I'm going against. So ultimately, like on like a consistency basis, I'm gonna beat those people more often than they beat me, no matter what deck I'm playing, just because my fundamentals and my processing speed are just there, you know?
Fundamentally, you know, if you put in the time, if you put in the effort to understand all the cards and to think through your combos, you can really just win most card games. Obviously, you know, there's going to be times where your opponent just top decks a perfect card or stuff like that. That's just unlucky. You know, you can't do very much about that, but I feel like, you know, 7 times out of 10, if you don't draw like a bad hand, your opponent draws a broken hand, or they just top deck something crazy, you know. I feel like you should be able to win most of the time, because I feel like with this card game, although we're talking a lot, you know, about how green's really, really strong right now, it's more of a competitive
it's not like
level.
that. Yeah, it's not that strong.
I think that fundamentally the game right now is very, very, very well balanced. The fact that there is multiple decks that are able to be played at the same time is something that's great. Like every deck at a fundamental level, every color at a fundamental level has a good deck. We got Doffy with blue. Some people like Croc. Me personally, I don't think Croc is that good. You know, for purple, obviously Kaido. Kaido's broken. There's a lot of builds of Kaido too. You know, you can play a burn Kaido deck where you just are accruing 5 Dawn per turn, and you can just burn your opponent multiple times and banish their cards, essentially.
Even if it's not the build, the correct build that you should be playing with Kaido, I want to take a moment to shout out the guy who only plays burn and who's slapped my boy the last 2 times, because thank you for doing my job for me, because this guy, he just gets slapped a lot by the burn Kaido deck, and I just find it really funny, because honestly, I just think that it's a little bit bricky.
It's extremely bricky.
And also, I just think that Douglas Bullet just kind of replaces the burn Kaido. So, it's kind of just like, It's kind of like so-so, but it's kind of just like one of those things where it's like, okay, well, if he has the curve, then you just get to go even higher ceiling. And that's what you got to think about. It's like, okay, while you can go that build in Kaido, if you hit the correct curve, it doesn't really matter what build you're playing. And that's why I would just choose to play the build that's going to be the most consistent at me hitting those ideal curves. Whereas if you're playing the 8 cost Kaido and you just establish 2 8 cost Kaido and you're just gaining 4 to 5 Dawn per turn, depending on if you have Onigashima, well, that's just broken. Obviously, you just win. You could literally theoretically use the burn ability every single turn.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, so but it's like, okay, well, what if you just brick? And you don't have the opportunity to put down the 8 cost because the guy's just going wide on you. Well, then you're just cucked, you know? And that's like the only fault of Kaido right now. But it's like, okay, the card quality is so high that it makes sense that you should have that fault. And I think a lot of people get this misconception where because they're going against people who are putting in more time with the fundamentals in general and understand the Dawn system so well that they play Kaido and they're like, okay, I can really only win with Kaido. And then they get a couple dubs under their belt and they're like, damn, I'm really good with Kaido. And it's just like, I mean, you can really only be so good with Kaido.
Eventually, Kaido's not going to be good anymore.
It's just through set 3, from what I understand, it literally just stays the same. There's one event that can be added to the Kaido archetype, Hell's Judgment in set 2, which essentially just gives 2 different characters or leaders minus 3k for that combat, but that doesn't change fundamentally what you're doing with the deck. You're looking to curve out, but that's just another card that could allow you to cheese when the guy goes for lethal.
Every other deck right now is just getting stronger and stronger. We're getting better red cards,
Mm-hmm.
We're getting better green cards. We're getting better blue cards. Kaido's just kind of at a standstill. They got the film structure deck, but in reality, the film structure deck just replaces cards that did the same thing with slightly better versions. Sure, it's a temporary power boost, but every other deck, Kaido's at a medium level right now, kind of even with the other stuff. After set 2 releases, everything else is getting pumped up another level.
Mm-hmm.
Kaido's still there. Set 3 releases, they're going to get, the event, but every other deck is getting stronger and stronger, especially with Black on the way.
Yeah. One thing I would say is you got to think it's like, okay, well, I've seen a lot of people on the Asian circuit use the same Kaido build that from set 1, some people not even choosing to include the film cards and still achieving success. There's this one guy from Singapore that I don't know what his name is exactly, but essentially he won some Asian Cup or some event that we don't have in English, so I don't know the name of it, but he was just explaining the reason why he played Kaido is because it's a 50-50 into every matchup, and you got to think the reason why the deck isn't changing at all going into set 2, potentially up until we get the Iceberg leader in set 3, is because the power level of the Kaido cards started off way higher than all of the other colors. So then we go into set 2 and it's like, okay, well now the Kaido deck didn't get any more powerful cards than it already had because it's already the ceiling for all cards in the game. The other colors just got more consistent to combat that.
I think that, but the problem with Kaido isn't even the power level, is that they needed a consistency boost, and they did not receive that. Kaido is still going to be, at the end of the day, the most coin flippy deck out there. You either draw the curve and you win, or you don't, and you lose.
Yeah. And one thing I think that they definitely need to do with purple, they don't even necessarily need to increase the consistency.
Honestly,
I think what they should do is find some way to increase the level of skill expression in the deck. And then that will increase the consistency of the deck on its own, naturally. Because that's the biggest problem right now. You can't necessarily, there's only so much you can do. You get into the late game, and you just keep top decking these cards that are so high cost. You can only play one of them per turn, and you gotta choose, okay, well, what is the best answer to his board right now? Okay, my turn's over. Whereas you play something like Kid, and you're like, hold up. My leader ability costs 3. I can pay this much to tap one of his guys. I have this much remaining. What if he blocks this? What if I do that? You know, and it requires more like of a processing speed to do than Kaido, where it's just like, it's pretty cut and dry.
I think that, in my opinion, Kaido is fundamentally brain dead. I think that it's not a very healthy deck. If Kaido was the best deck, it would not be healthy.
100%. Yeah, that's what
I think that Kaido is just an unhealthy character and leader for the game currently. I think that eventually when we replace that leader with another purple leader, I think that purple will get more of a healthy game state because we'll start seeing them put a power into other non-Kaido cards. Because right now, when you really think about it, I mean, just the threat of the 10 drop is what's keeping Kaido alive. If it wasn't for the 10 drop, it would be like not as good.
I think also the 5-cost queen. You know,
5-cost queen is extremely powerful, but that's going to be played in other decks. That's not the end all be all.
Yeah. It's just that card is kind of just a fundamentally like high ceiling, like potentially one of the best cards in the game. And I know a lot of people get tired of me saying this is the best card of the game, but that's the best card of the game. It's just
He says it about every card.
Okay, well, what I mean that about this card is, if you could put that in any deck without color restrictions, I would put that in every deck. There's no reason not to. And that brings me to something I wanted to talk to you guys about today, which is another thing that's fundamentally broken about the game that I don't hear anyone touch on is the effect to return Dawn to the Dawn deck. That's essentially just a fake cost. You know, not even just in purple, but when you get into the late game, that is not even a real cost. And you're just getting these powerful effects with no drawback. And that's something that's like, it's so crazy to me because when I first started playing the game, it took me a bit to understand that you can use the return Dawn effect from characters that have that Dawn as well as tapped. Like, I get it that you can use something to pay a cost and then play a return Dawn effect, but the fact that you can also just put, like, 7 Dawn on your leader. Okay, I'm going to attack you for 12k. Okay, you take the damage. Okay, now I'm going to return that to the Dawn deck, guarantee a second damage. That just blows my mind that you're allowed to do that, and I think it just sets up the game for an unhealthy manner where when purple is currently like solely based around that mechanic, it's hard to say that they can make purple the best deck without a lot of people like getting irritated with the game because that's just inherently a busted mechanic.
I think that just purple is inherently not a very fun deck to play against. If you're playing against purple, you're either winning or you're losing, and there's no in between. There's no fun back and forth. Purple is just like, oh, okay, he has it. There's nothing I can really say.
Except the purple mirror match. And that's where you guys just have like a gentleman's agreement that you're both just like degenerate fucks.
I mean, yeah, in reality, I mean, it's just not a very healthy deck. I think that I'd rather play against all greens in one tournament than against all purple. Even if I have a worse matchup all around, just because I'll have more fun.
That's true. And you also got to think, at least in the green match, there are like, the only times I would say it's not skillful is if you curve out versus blue. If you curve out versus blue, obviously that's just degenerate because there's currently no way to out the 8-drop. But in all other situations, you know, you've seen me beat a lot of green people with the blue deck anyway, you know? And a lot of people in the comments are like, how do you beat green? You're a troll. Like, how are you even winning? I'm like, dude, I'm just outskilling people because I'm just locked in, baby, you know? And it's just like, there's a lot of little micro interactions where you can beat the green person because when we think about what the game plan of green is at its core, the central idea is, how can I use my turn to gain an increment of an advantage?
Just a little bit, the smallest amount. But it just starts adding up. Eventually, you know, 1 card, 2 cards gone from your opponent's hand. They had to discard. You know, they took a damage. You know, they're slowly creeping in. And then at the end, bam, just, you know, attack 7 to your kid. Attack for, you know, 12. Swing twice for 12. What are they going to do, you know?
Yeah, and honestly, when you think about it, it's kind of like climbing up a mountain if you're playing green. Let's say one turn, I play Law, and I return back my 1-cost character to play a 3-cost character on 5 Dawn, and that gains me, you know, a 2 Dawn advantage, which is something that not a lot of people have been thinking about, and that's why we've seen recent success with 4 Law in the Green Kid deck prior to previous Treasure Cups. Well, then going on to the following turn, I've climbed up the mountain a little bit. Well, it's up to me on the next turn to see how can I gain a Dawn advantage this turn, how can I gain a +1, and if I choose not to do so, then I'm essentially falling down the mountain and I've got to keep going up. But you do 3 or 4 turns like that in succession, and it starts to feel really polarizing, and that's where people can get the idea like, this is so brain dead, this is so broken. It's like, yeah, but the guy did have to like play perfectly, and if he didn't, then you get a lot of people playing green, like our friend who lost to like 8 blue people in a row, and he's like, I don't know how you win with this deck, because he was just doing it in a completely different way, and that's something you have to understand to be good with green.
I think in green you have to be able to understand how much advantage you're gaining on your opponent, you know. Because when you really think about it, in a blank space, Nekomamushi, you know, your opponent's just starting a 2K, you know, to protect their Nico Robin.
Yeah.
But then when you really think about it, you know, they're discarding a card, and they have to discard it again next turn. That's already 2 cards gone from their hand. And if you kill their Nico Robin, that's 3 cards total that they lost an advantage just for you playing 1 card.
100%, and especially you could also bait the person. Let's say their unit was previously already tapped, and then you attack it, and then, you know, they discard a card, and then you do something that allows you to guarantee killing the card that they didn't know about. You know, you have something in your hand like...
a killer.
Yeah, you have a kill. That's true. A killer or an X-ray. That's a great example. You attack their Nico Robin. They protect it with a 2K from hand, and then afterwards you play a killer, kill it anyway, and that's just allowing you to kind of just snowball the game. And if you're able to make like multiple reads like that in a row, you can, you know, just gain so much advantage that it feels so polarizing. And, you know, I want to bring this up because one thing that a lot of people haven't really talked about is how, like, skill-based the game is and how much variance you can remove if Kaido isn't in the meta. So at this previous Treasure Cup, the guy who got first, I don't know whether this is true or not, but I saw that the guy said he went 13-0, never losing a game in Swiss, which was best of 1, and then in Top Cuts, he never lost a game in best 2 out of 3. And his friend, who also played, you know, the same list, that guy, he lost like 1 or 2 times in Swiss or something. But overall, in Top Cut, the first time he got like a legit loss was in Top 4 versus his friend who won the whole thing. And that just demonstrates to me that the green deck has like a high level of like skill expression if you were at that like top % of people who are putting in a lot of time and understand the interactions. Because if it didn't, then, you know, I'm sure that these guys would have like a loss like throughout the tournament, you know, especially the guy who went first, to not lose 1 game in best 2 out of 3 or in Swiss. That's literally insane. And the guy also said that he went against 7 mirror matches. I'm not sure if that was in Swiss or if that was all together, but to go 7 mirror matches and win every single one, regardless, is insane.
Extremely impressive.
You know, and so that leads me into a discussion which I want to know, like, what do you think that guy was doing to create that, like, difference between him and the other people?
I think that he just understood the amount of advantage he was gaining, you know. I think that, you know, he was basically in the mirror. The slight advantage you're gaining is almost multiplied because you know that in green, you know, if your shit gets killed, you just lost that and you have to play from hand. That's almost like you're playing against your own game plan whenever you're losing. So whenever your opponent in green, you know, they play Nekomamushi, you have to play extremely conservatively because almost whoever goes first and loses with that advantage starts snowballing down.
So what specifically, I mean, like, would you say most that is like differentiating,
So, for
like,
example,
from like different like interactions to
So
like
so for example, if you played an Okiku and then a Nekomamushi, you're an Okiku, and then I kill your Okiku, that's just really that you're the first person to lose advantage.
Yep.
So now you've lost that card, and assuming like let's say I bait you and I kill it with I attack you with my leader, you discard, and then I get a killer out. What are you doing? You just lost 2 cards in advantage, and as long as I don't attack you directly, I can go forward with my game plan, gain more advantages from my body and my Momonosuke. And eventually you get to the point where I have like 3 more cards in hand than you. You're like at 3, I'm at 6. And I just have a kid in my hands, and I'm the first one to play it.
Yeah.
It's extremely polarizing.
So kind of the first one big thing I want to bring up to kind of create that interaction. I'm not sure if everyone is doing this, but I've definitely seen some people do this incorrectly. Personally, I feel like if you were playing green and you go against a mirror match, you should choose to go second every time if you win the die roll, and as well versus law. I'm not sure if you should do that versus like red. But I wouldn't be surprised if, like, this guy would agree.
Play a Nekomamushi and tap their 3-drop. And killing a 3-drop is just so important.
Exactly.
Killing a Robin, an Okiku, a Zoro even,
Yeah, and another thing is, I think one thing that a lot of people have trouble with is knowing when to attack first. Because on a fundamental level with Kid, which is something that's very different than any other deck, with 5 life, you typically want to take damage until you get down to 1 or 0, and that's something you just don't do with any other deck. So when you think about that in terms of the mirror, and the way you win the mirror is by, winning control of board and card advantage, when is the first time I should attack? That's something important to gauge, just in terms of like what I'm thinking this guy did to, win these games. I don't know if he won them decisively or if he had to take some risks, but I didn't hear on the stream that the commentator was saying that essentially the difference between a lot of these people who made it to Top Cut and people who didn't was by making decisions that kind of risked it all for them to go to lethal, instead of trying to prolong the game. Not even just in green, but just in general, because sometimes you'll prolong the game and it's a guaranteed loss for you when you have the opportunity to a shot at winning and you don't take it.
Sometimes you just have to go for game.
And that's something that I have been faulty of myself. I find it kind of difficult, and this is one of my main points of how I think the guy who won the Treasure Cup, like why he did, is because this guy has experience with other Bandai games in the past, and from what I understand, Bandai games all, for the most part, have some type of counter mechanic. And one thing I struggle with in the late game is understanding if the guy has like 4 life, what is the likelihood of me going for game? Like, I know there's a way I can.
It depends on the deck. If you're going against like blue, for example, you're more than likely not going to be able to kill. They have a lot of 2Ks. They have a lot of counters, But if you're going against red, red can just get unlucky and get like 2, 3 Zoros off of 2 Zoros and like a.
Can you scoot up a little bit?
And they can just get no counter. That's a pretty common thing to happen in red. You just get no counter from your life, and then you just kind of lose.
Very true, and especially in law. One thing that I've learned over time is that in law, a lot of times when you think the guy could defend something, or maybe he has like 3 or 4 life and you can't go for a game, you actually can, just based on the sheer amount of non-counter cards in the deck. And that's really important to know, because I know there's a couple times I've lost to you and other people where it's just like, I could have just went for a game, but I was just like, wait, this guy has cards. And if you don't know exactly what the builds are that are currently going on, then you don't know that. And that's like, that's really important, especially in the green matchup too. If the guy is playing, for law, he's playing Basil Hawkins, he's playing Kid, both 7 and 8, and he's got some events in his deck, that's like at least 15% of his deck is no counter. And even though he has hella cards, you could go for game. And it's hard to factor that in. So in terms of like what this guy did to win the Treasure Cup over other people, that's one of the main things I'm thinking about, because if he has experience understanding countering and allocating Dawn, he was probably able to process that like super fast.
It's just something that you have to have almost like a muscle memory, you know?
Yeah, and that's just really broken. It kind of just makes people who have played previous Bandai games like fundamentally at like a head start, because like, you know, I'll just be like, wait, so if I have like a law and I have a 8-cost kid and my leader, I'm like, how much Dawn should I put on these people? Especially if he has a blocker. Like, do I allocate the Dawn to play my tapper to rest his blocker? Or do I just make it to where I can achieve an additional attack by buffing someone to use that blocker? And you got to think about that like super fast when, you know, the guy has 3 to 4 life. And if you're able to do that, that's not only like insane, it's also just intimidating to the other guy, because he has to process like how many potential attacks you can do as well. You know, that's something that people don't recognize, and he probably just didn't go into time very often. And I think that in green, you can be cheesing time a little bit because, you know, especially in the mirror, if the guy's a head-on damage, from what I understand, I haven't really got into like the tiebreakers because every time I went to time, it was just a decisive match. But I know the tiebreakers are kind of weird. Like, one of them is who has more cards left in deck. And that's like, okay, what does that even have to do with the game?
It goes cards in life, cards in hand, characters on field, and then cards in deck.
Yeah, like that's just so weird to me, because it puts you in a situation where you thought you were in a position to win. And in the green mirror, since both of you guys have so much high defense, you can just like get into a weird situation where the other guy actually wins because of like some factors, you know?
What's time is up?
It's 2:36.
Okay, we have time.
Okay. Yeah. I think that that's probably what the guy did, because I don't know about anybody else, but for me personally, I just get into these situations where I have to put a lot of Dawn on guys and like think about what the proper number is.
7's the magical number.
But even when you say 7's a magical number, when the guy has 3 or 4 in the damage zone, and then he has like 6 cards in hand, you're like, wait, okay, well, is it better to go to 9, make the guy use 3 cards,
I mean,
then go to like...
It's a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's hard to know.
Sometimes you just, like, if your opponent has more cards in hand, obviously, you know, you're going to want to attack with your low numbers first. What I like to do is, you know, my first attack is usually with the 5.
Yeah.
So if they have, like, you know, 2 cards in hand, but they have, like, 3 life left, right? Yeah. You attack with the 5, they take it. Then you attack with the 7, they take it. And then you try to see how high you can go with your Dawn. You know, if you can go for another 7, you're probably going to go for that. But your last one, you're probably going to want to be 9.
Yeah, you know, and that's what's kind of nice about Kid, because you can go you can attack for 12k 2 times, and on a fundamental level, if we're both in a top deck situation, that's broken.
That's extremely powerful.
That's like, it's really hard for you to lose. So that's why we've seen like even versus Kaido, which is the worst matchup for the deck, you can still win. And I think I'm getting close to that point where even if someone high rolls me, I should be able to beat them, you know, like majority of the time. I just need to be a little bit faster, because against the Kaido deck especially, it's kind of hard to tell how much counter the guy has, and he could legitimately high roll from the damage zone.
Oh,
you know?
100%.
He could literally like hit a Thunder Boggle in the damage zone while he's tapped out of Dawn. That gives him an active Dawn as a trigger. Then he has a Blast Breath, you know? There's a lot of like things you got to think about that, like in Kaido, where the damage zone is like super important to him. And that's like a lot of the games I've lost.
That's why I think Yamato is extremely strong. I think that one Yamato minimum in the deck just allows you to banish, which ends double attack damage. You can just get rid of 2 cards from their pile, and then don't get it to hand. I think that against Kaido, that's kind of game winning.
Exactly. Yeah, that's one thing I do want to talk about too, because I think a lot of people have the same question as me. How good is Yamato?
I think Yamato is...
Like, what matchups is it good with?
Though there's not a matchup that it's bad against. I think that Yamato, fundamentally, is just being underappreciated, underrepresented in the current meta. Because even if you're just playing one, the variety it allows you to add to your deck. You can just play it, and your opponent has to get rid of it. If they don't get rid of it, they're going to take... you're going to put 5 Dawn on it and swing for 10k.
Exactly.
And what are they going to do? drop 3 cards and block it? No, they're not. They're going to take that, and then they're already in. They literally just lost 2 cards in card advantage that you still have. I think that's why I like it in Law. I think that I'm probably going to put 1 in Law, just because I'm going to be playing Momonosuke.
Yeah. So yeah, no, let's kind of talk about, before you have to go, since you played a lot of Law, let's kind of talk about like what we think the best choices to play in Law are. Because there's a lot of variation with the deck, and it's probably currently the deck with like the most customization, where you can say like not everything is correct. And we both recently found out about a list that's like super spicy.
I think that Control Law is the way to go currently. I think that I was right since the beginning. In my original list.
Since the beginning, okay, hold on. Judge, okay, in this original list, the man was playing 4 Zoro and 3 Luffy.
No,
that's not considered Control.
The list before that, I was playing a list that had 3 Robins and 2 Yamatos, plus 4 Momonosuke's. I think that I was on the right path there, because Yamato is just such a powerful card. And I was playing 12 blockers. I was playing 2 Kid. I was playing an extremely defensive list. And I think that that's currently the right way to go. In a Treasure Cup situation, locally, sadly, I don't think that list is as viable, because there's a lot of purple players.
Yeah.
And, kind of just always has a 10 drop possibility. And that's just kind of sad that I can't play the optimal version of my list just because, some people are playing a bad deck. But I think that if you're going to the Treasure Cup, that playing a more control heavy build with, at the very minimum, 2 8-drop kids,
I tried it with 3, and honestly, I didn't find 3 8-drop bad.
Yes, no, I think that 8-drop kid is extremely powerful, because you can just diminish the amount of ability and recursion your opponent has. Between Robin just killing stuff, Yamato getting double attack banish, and them having to focus and pour all their resources into killing my kid, I just think that's the best way to play the deck.
Yeah. So, I guess let's kind of just go through, like, the card choices, like, individually. So, 8-cost Kid, the advantages of playing 3, why I think, like, 3 worked for me is because, that is a card you can search off Bonnie, and that's why it's amazing, because Bonnie is cracked in the deck. But what I found was, a lot of the times when you're using Bonnie, until you get to the later stages of the game, it's hard to add the 8-cost Kid because you want to search your Law immediately, because it's so integral.
Pass it over and still be able to grab it later.
Yeah, so if you bottom deck at the beginning of the game and you only play 2 copies, you're running that risk of not getting to seed at all. But since the deck has a lot of cards with no counter, you can't really afford to do that in the early game, even if you need it.
That's the thing I like about the Yamato. Yamato has a 1K counter.
100%. Yeah, and you think about it, we've seen a lot of people recently with Law, they choose to go second now, which I know is something that honestly, neither of us really thought about, until, the past couple weeks of how, much better I think that is currently.
I think that if you're going against green or playing in the mirror, going second is better, but I think if you're playing against a blue player or a purple player, you should be going first. Just because of the way that the matchup works against those decks.
Yeah, I was just talking about in general, if you're playing the version with Radical Beam, you pretty much just want to go second every time because you want to be at 2 life immediately to get that trigger.
Yes, no, that's fair.
And drawing the additional card is really integral in these builds where people only play Law as their payoff. Because, at the beginning of the meta, you were playing 4 Zoro, everyone's playing 4 Zoro, everyone's playing 3 Luffy, and when you go into these control builds, you think about it, and, I just had this realization that I was like, okay, you've won a lot with the deck, probably more than, anybody I've seen, and the only times I saw you lose were because you drew too many cards with no counter in hand, and I think a lot of people just had this tunnel vision, okay, Zoro is a really unfair card, so you want to mix it out, because in a vacuum, it's insane, and it's there's so much hype behind it, and then you just realize, at most, you should probably be playing 2 copies, because you just can't, have that much, non-counter cards in the deck. It really only helps you versus Kaido, In a lot of matchups, it's situational, because when you're maxing out on Robin, you really are doing the same thing. It's just you don't need that agency immediately since you have so many cards that give you advantage in the early turns.
Robin is like Okiku. It just gains you advantage slowly over time. I just think that that slight recursion, that slight advantage you're gaining every single turn is just so powerful.
And the fact that Robin has a counter is another factor that makes it insane.
Very, very strong. Only thing bad about it is that we don't have an alternate Robin. Something that we desperately needed in set 1.
True. So that goes into the next character I want to talk about, which is Gordon. So Gordon is a very interesting card because, if you're going to the Treasure Cup, we obviously want to build our Law deck to beat Kid since it's the most represented deck. And I think that if you're very talented with Law, that you should choose that over Kid if you have the option because of the level of skill expression and your ability to go 50-50 in every matchup. I think that you have a higher chance to beat the Kaido players with Law than you do versus Kid, because you can mitigate the those RNG interactions with Law that you can't in Kid because of your 1 to 2 copies of Zoro. And so I think that Gordon is a very interesting card because you play Gordon on turn 1, and if you're going second, you're putting out 2 characters. Then on turn 2, if you put out a Robin, then now on turn 3, your Robin is able to kill a 5-cost queen on attack, which is really good because you got to think, okay, well, essentially, I was just using my Robin as an attacker, and then my Gordon was almost just like a jet pistol. It was essentially a 2 Dawn jet pistol because you paid 1 for your Robin and 1 for your Gordon, and then 1 card was sent to exchange with theirs. So it's not even really a neg 1. Number 2, it accomplishes the goal of putting 5 characters on the board, and it is a red 1 cost as well, which was one of my first thoughts about the deck is, how many good low-cost red cards can we play, and can we max out on those before dipping into the low-cost green cards, because those are ultimately our shambles targets. And you get into a situation sometimes where you have the Gordon on board so that you can shambles and play your Law, and even though you're not going to bounce the Gordon, well, it allows you to accomplish the goal of 5 characters. But after you've put your Law on the board, now you don't care about having 5 total characters on the board. In fact, since you just got such a Dawn advantage from that character exchange, you probably want to clear up a space. So then you just use your Gordon, it gives you a free space, it was no longer the use of you, maybe it even attacked a Searcher first. And then you lower the attack on their Kid, for example. Now it's 5k.
Put a jet pistol on it.
Yeah. Or even if you have an Otama, which is very common, is a 4 in the deck, you have Momo, you play that off of your Law, then you Gordon Otama, and that means your Robin can kill their Kid.
Super, super strong.
And yeah, that's something that a lot of people are not going to play around. It's difficult for you to play around. Maybe the Kid player has multiple blockers up, and you just are able to create that Gordon interaction, and you just bypass that aspect of the game. So that's why a lot of people, think Law is strong right now because of that Otama jet pistol interaction, and Gordon really allows you to play into that. Now, the disadvantage of it is, I wouldn't say it not having a counter is bad. It's more about the fact that it doesn't have a searchable type. And
yeah, it's either you see it or you don't, and when you see it, sometimes it's bad. But when it's good, god damn it, is it fucking good.
Yeah, and it's hard to get conclusive evidence of it at our local scene because we're not following the metagame essentially, but I have a good feeling that it is, pretty good to play 1 to 2 copies in your deck. With the current metagame. We saw someone in top 4 recently who played 2 Gordon, and I really liked that list. I think it was from the most recent Treasure Cup in Miami, and I would recommend checking it out because it's a different direction people have been taking the deck. But, the fundamental problem with this 2 8-cost Kid or more build centered around Robin is, number 1, if your Robin gets tapped by Cat Viper, you feel really bad because it's 4k. And that's where the next card, we're going to talk about, Okiku, comes into play, which I think, has a really good argument to be in the deck for at least 1 to 2 copies. How do you feel about Okiku in the deck?
I think Okiku, even though it has no counter, it's still very, 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 very strong. It just allows you to gain the same ability of green to gain that slight advantage turn by turn. I think Okiku just allows you to get that slight ability to gain advantage against other decks. You know, you kill something, then you tap something. You know, whether it be a blocker or not, you know, it's extremely powerful. If you tap a blocker or 1K, you know, you can attack it with your Nami that has nothing, you know. Kill a blocker. You can also tap something like a Law, and just destroy it.
Yeah, and another argument to play the card is the fact, like, versus Kaido, you know, Robin isn't very good because it's not a natural attacker, whereas Okiku, even if you don't get to use the effect, it is a natural attacker that you can put out, which is important to winning that matchup since we're not maxing out on Zoro. Because it's another card we can attack with, and when you play this 3-drop centered build, you know, you might think at first glance, this is worse versus Kaido because we don't have that aggression, but you can get into these situations where you have multiple 3 costs on the board, and that means when they 7-drop King, they don't get to kill 2 things, because with 7-drop King, you have to kill something 2 or less, as well as 3 or less. And I think that just allows you to get more turns before they 10 cost. So that's something a lot of people overlook. Now, one of the problems with Okiku is because it's not a Straw Hat Supernova, you know, that lowers your counts.
But you're playing the Land of Wano package to make up for that.
So this is why it's difficult for me to come to a conclusive build with the control version, and why things aren't set in stone is because you have to lower your types to angle it in this direction that's good versus green, that's going to be good versus the mirror. You have to essentially, like, you know, in my opinion, you have to play 4 Cat Viper. I think that's just the best card in the game versus the top 3 decks. And because we're playing 4 Cat Viper for Otama, which is another great card that I would put in any deck if I was allowed to, why would you not play Momo? You know, at first I had, you know, second thoughts about playing Momo because of the slots, but now I'm just like, I would like at least 2 Momo because those cards are just so powerful that if we're going second, putting the Momo on board turn 1.
Searchable Jet Pistol Otama is just too strong not to be able to play.
Yeah, and when you add the Okiku, it adds another layer to that. So even though it's lowering your types, it gives you another hit, and turn 1...
Especially if you have Yamato as well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the Yamato. So that's why I decided to play 4 Momo in my kid deck, is because I get into a lot of situations, and if someone else gets in with this situation as well, make sure to let me know. But when I'm playing green, I never draw Bonnie, and I'm at a point where I can't take any more damage, but I can free search off of Momo. And it's not necessarily that I just wanted specifically Yamato, it's the fact that my Momo can search a 5 cost, and if I wasn't able to search a 5 cost, I have no kill potential, and I'm not able to get into the ability to play a threat. So that's where the Yamato comes up, and that's also relevant in the Law deck, because you need another payoff sometimes besides Law, which makes it very interesting, because since all of the cards you want to bounce, primarily your Nami is red, then even if you're not bouncing a Law, it's still free advantage for you to put out the Yamato, even if it's not preferred.
Yep. Grabbing another Nami searcher, extremely broken.
Yeah, you know, because that could get you to something else that lets you end the game. Now, I think that one card that's also underlooked in the deck is Gum Gum Red Hawk, because when we delve into this control archetype, that's a card that's a counter similar to Radical Beam on the defensive side. Very strong versus green. It allows you to kill their Okiku. Very strong versus red, killing their Robin. All of the blockers in those 2 decks, very strong targets. And then, you know, you think about the trigger abilities, also game-changing, which is another reason why you like Jet Pistol so much in that deck. When you get into this control archetype, especially running Momo, your types go down low. And so it gets into a point that you're running cards, even if they're not the best, just because they have double types. And putting those in the deck could allow you to play less Zoros or less Luffy, which is what I'm inclined to do, because in my opinion, Zoro is a situational card that's not good in every matchup. And really with Luffy, I only really want to play that in this archetype if I already have 8 cost Kid on the board. Because that's just inherently broken. You know?
I think eventually we're going to see some Straw Hat Land of Wano cards. And those will be very, 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 very...
It's going to be so crazy.
Yep.
I honestly foresee if there is a ban list structure in the future that either Bonnie or Momo will get some kind of limitation where you can only play like 2 copies in your deck or 3 copies. Like, I wouldn't be surprised with that just because of like how like unfair that seems to be going. And you know, they just keep increasing these targets. It's like, with most characters they could introduce into the game, there's a very strong chance that they'll have the Supernovas keyword. Like, that's a lot of people, as well as Land of Wano.
Especially with Land of Wano being a big part of the plot currently in One Piece. I think definitely we're going to start seeing some more Land of Wano cards.
Yeah.
No spoilers though, because he hasn't finished One Piece. I can't give spoilers.
Hey, I just finished the first big battle, boys. The Battle of the Best. I'm prepared for set 2. I'm locked in for the Baroque Works part 2. Unfortunately, I found out that this guy was wrong, and that unless there's an errata, I don't think you can use the former Baroque Work cards.
You can't. Keywords can't be. It's not like Yu-Gi-Oh.
Well, previously this guy in the judge pool said that you were allowed to use that.
He was wrong.
That's how it works for events. If there's an event that lists that, then that's legal. But for characters, for some reason currently, that's not legal.
That's weird.
Yeah, I mean, that's just what this guy was saying. But
What time is it?
it's 2:56.
Okay. I'm really going to start heading out.
Okay. You have any last thoughts on the law deck, sir?
What
inclusions for the Treasure Cup?
Last thoughts. I think that Yamato, extremely underestimated. Yamato, one of the strongest cards currently. You know, if your opponent doesn't see it coming, it can end the game. It can single-handedly win you against purple. Because once purple's low on cards, you know, they get all their advantage from their damage pile. And negating that, it just kind of wins you the game.
Yeah, as well as one card that you shouldn't sleep on is Will You Be My Samurai? Because that card is
100%. I think that card has a lot of potential currently.
If you guys haven't checked it out, there was a guy, I honestly forgot the guy's name, but shout out to him. I guess at one of the Treasure Cups, he said he went 7-0 in Swiss with this weird build where he played You Can Be My Samurai, and then he lost in time in the final 2 matches, and then I guess he won like 5 side events going undefeated in all of them. And he just demonstrated to me the power of You Can Be My Samurai, especially when the other guy doesn't know you have it, because you get into a lot of situations, especially versus green, where the guy could tap your stuff anyway, so you might as well draw 2, especially with your Nami. If you can tap your Nami, it's probably worth it for you to tap anything else, especially if you can shambles, because that's just drawing you 2 cards deeper to access your Law, which is the focal point of the deck. And it's another card that is searchable by Momo, making you miss less, but which allows you to access other searchers and key components of the deck because it's a combo deck. And with that, I want to thank you so much for getting this far in the podcast, and make sure to leave a like on this video as well as hitting subscribe for the next one. And hopefully I'm able to see you guys at the Dallas Treasure Cup if you're going and we're still able to go.
Well, we should see y'all there. We're going to be going 25th, you know. So hopefully we'll be able to enter the events. And even if we're not, you know, we'll be there.
We'll be chilling, you know. So with that being said, if it's not the goo, it's got to go. Peace.
Ooh, is that indigo?